Indiana's best political team says it will take consistent law enforcement and resources for community programs to break the cycle of violence. They sit down with News 8 government reporter Garrett Bergquist in this week's episode of All Indiana Politics.
Former Indiana Democratic Party Chair Kip Tu and former Marion County Republican Party Chair Tom Johns say the proposed extended curfew might work, but efforts to curb youth violence can't end there.
Obviously, you know, and Tom knows that these are not criminal charges, and so the ability to put somebody in prison isn't there to keep them off the streets. And I'm not sure that we would want that to happen, because a lot of these people are, they're kids, obviously, and we don't want them to get a record because they happen to be out late, not doing anything wrong necessarily. So, I think it's probably worth a try. Lots of other things have been tried. I would note that, Indianapolis right now is 30% lower in murder rate than they were this time last year, and 50% lower than it was in 21. That, of course, doesn't help the people that are suffering, the families that are suffering here today. But we are on the right track, although some days it doesn't seem like we are.
And Kip, the point that you raised does lead me into my next question. Tom, there have been quite a few studies that have found that if kids enter the juvenile justice system, that puts them at a much greater risk of being justice involved as an adult. So how do we enforce this without basically feeding into that prison pipeline?
Well, I think, as Kip said, these aren't criminal laws, but they are laws that protect the public safety. And so what we need to do is we need to enforce the laws that are on the books. Let's start there. This happened at 1:30 in the morning. The current statute, or current ordinance, is 11 o'clock. So the mayor needs to give the police the support to actually go out and do the things that they need to do to protect this community. And really, that's what this comes down to, is the lack of leadership. As far as the kids that you're bringing in, the idea is you take them to their house and say, is somebody here? Why is this child out? And then if those parents aren't answering, you need to then have a harder conversation, whether that's a city county building or whether that's at the state house, as to these parents' responsibility for their children and whether they should be responsible if they're not actually taking care of the children, and children are truant.
You can see much more of our discussion this Sunday on All Indiana Politics. It airs at 9:30 in the morning, right here on Wish TV. I'm Garrett Bergquist for Wish TV and WishTV.com.